Podcast Network Asia.
Welcome to She Talks Peace, a podcast that highlights the role of women peacebuilders around the world in bringing lasting peace and security to communities. Eavesdrop on their communities and get to know their stories. From the Philippines to Malaysia, from Indonesia to Palestine, from Myanmar to the United States. Their dreams and hopes for a world without violence and a world where every woman and girl can be whoever she wants to be. Hosted by Amina Bernardo, President of the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy. This is She Talks Peace.
For the most part, in conflict settings, a lot of the responses are very gender blind. Not looking at women, not looking at young girls at all, immediately just like, let's just cram everyone in because it's emergency. Like everybody's just trying to respond to what is happening on the ground. But what we're saying is that, look, if you're being gender blind, then you're definitely forgetting one part of the equation, which is women and girls.
Hi, everybody. This is Ayesah, and I'm here joining you from Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. And I'm based here at University Malaysia Sabah. Hi, Amina.
Hey, Ayesah. Hey, I was going to ask you, are you a fan of ABBA?
Yes, I am. I mean, I like their songs, but I somehow have a selective memory. I'm not very good in memorizing the names or the titles of their songs. And I also don't know who are the ABBA members. So I have to
You're kidding
resign,
me.
from that duty. Yeah. But the minute that I hear the music, of course, I know that it's ABBA. But I just couldn't remember the lyrics or the titles of the song. But of course, they're, I think every generation knows ABBA. Even my daughter would know ABBA songs.
You make me feel really bad because that means you are really that much younger than I am that you don't know the names of the ABBA group. But anyway, the reason I asked you remember their song Chiquitita?
Oh yes, definitely.
Chiquitita, tell me that one, right?
I was in high school when that became big.
Oh, quit it, Ayesah. Stop rubbing it in.
Okay. Go ahead. So what's so special about this Chiquitita song?
Because I found out that ABBA wrote that song for UNICEF during the Year of the Child, decades ago.
Okay, yes.
And ABBA gave the copyright to UNICEF.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Did you know that the funds from Chiquitita is allocated towards the UNICEF projects for girls' education? Isn't that nice?
That's a very noble initiative then.
There's this news. They were doing interviews with these girls in Guatemala. And one of the projects was a series of workshops on health and self-esteem for primary school girls, where sexual education is lacking and domestic abuse of young girls was rather rampant. So ABBA was interviewed, and ABBA was very clear about where they wanted the money from Chiquitita to go. And the lead, one of the two males who formed ABBA, Bjorn, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Ulvaeus. Yeah. So he said that the most urgent thing that can be done in this globe is the empowerment of young women and girls. Isn't that sweet?
True.
And he was remarking that it's really sad that there are cultures and religions around the globe that just don't give girls equal chances. So they told, ABBA told UNICEF that's where they want the money to go, girls' education. And I keep wondering, you think the girls in Afghanistan are able to access any of this?
Among the UN agencies, I think both UNICEF and UN Women are really very active, and they are really the frontliners among the UN agencies wherever there's a crisis, humanitarian crisis. Like in Myanmar, I'm sure UNICEF is very busy there, and so with UN Women. Yeah.
Let's keep our fingers crossed, and let's hope that Chiquitita reaches Afghanistan. Although knowing the Taliban, they will not allow the singing of Chiquitita.
Oh yeah. Yes. Okay. So I think it's also interesting that today we have a young lady joining us, and let's ask her then if she also knows Chiquitita, and maybe she will be able to sing for us. Yeah, but this guest of ours today is very interesting because at the very early age, I think at the age of 14 years old.
Yeah.
So she must be in second year high school in the Philippines. The age of 14, she has already been a human rights defender, and that she was actually doing peer education, teaching other girls about violence against women and girls. So I think this is really an opportunity for us to tell her stories. How did it come about that a 14-year-old girl very early on, embraced, this kind of advocacy and work? And then her name, is Shamah Bulangis, and she's from the Visayas region. And Shamah here co-chairs this Transform Education Program, which is a network of young feminists under the United Nations Girls Education Initiative. She is also a founder in the Visayas region of this LBTQ network without the G. So we will find out from her how come it is an LBTQ network, which is a network for what happened to the G, which is a network for lesbian, bisexual, trans, and queer women in the Visayas region in the Philippines. And then at present, Shamah is working with UN Women as co-coordinator for civil society advocacy and monitoring. So for our special lady of the day is Shamah. Shamah, welcome to She Talks Peace.
Hi, Shamah. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Shamah.
I just actually want to say that I do know ABBA.
You've heard about Chiquitita, Shamah.
Yeah.
You've heard about
I hear that all the time. Whenever there's karaoke in my neighbor's house, and the titas will sing it all the time. Chiquitita is always there. So I think that I didn't know that the Chiquitita, the rights to Chiquitita belong to UNICEF. I think I'm gonna listen to it on loop now because of that.
And when you have sessions, you start with Chiquitita.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Let's promote Chiquitita.
Love that.
So to tell us, Shamah, I mean, Ayesah was just saying that you started becoming an activist at the age of 14. At 14, I'm trying to remember what was I doing? So how did you, a 14-year-old, become an advocate? An advocate? What drove you? What drove you to it, Shamah?
When I was 14, Dr. Ayesah, you're right. I was in second year high school, and everything that's going on in a second year high school year old's mind was going through my mind. Like I hadn't had my period yet. I was like, when am I gonna get my period, Lord? Please don't let me die before I get my period. Does my crush like me back? Like,
I remember those days.
Is there a chance? Will I have a relationship at the end of high school? Like, will I ever have a relationship? And then at the same time as well, I was also a nerd. So I would read a lot. I was very interested in the law at that time. So I would just like look up law things. I'm not pursuing law right now, but I was very interested in becoming a lawyer when I was in high school. And then there's this program by Girl Scouts during that time. It was the Adolescent Female Health Program that they have with UNFPA and with YPeer. YPeer is also an organization that exists to this day. And then that program had like a full-on module on adolescent female health, STI, HIV, AIDS, which was for high school kids like me. I was very interested in violence against women and girls. Actually, VAWC, Violence Against Women and Children, which is RA 9262, the Republic Act 9262 in the Philippines. And I studied that heavily when I after
wow.
And then after that, I was like, how do I apply this? What is going on in my city? I was in Surigao yet. I was in Mindanao. I was in northeastern Mindanao. I became very active as a peer educator after that. Young girls my age and younger than me in high school came forward and told me about their stories as well, of how they were. I don't know if this is a trigger. This is a trigger warning for those who are listening, but came forward and told me that their uncles would do inappropriate things to them. In issues of violence in the family, which is a lot to handle for a 14-year-old. That made me angrier, and that made me spiteful, and that made me do the work of peer education a lot more. The existing campaign was just say no at the time. But then, like, if you're young, you can't really just say no, right? So we had to form a system wherein if you wanted to report anything in my high school, then you can report it, but not everybody would want to report it for the sake of the family. There are a lot of complications around violence against women and girls, which made me really interested in working on it even up until now.
Shamah, Ayesah, you and me, we're all originally from Mindanao. And I think this must be true also for you, Ayesah. But when I was in high school, when I was with the Girl Scouts, you never talked about this kind of harassment, this kind of violence against girls, at the hands of family members or people of authority. If it ever happened, you'd talk about it quietly amongst yourselves, among us girlfriends lang. But you did not report it. You did not come forward because it was a shame. You shamed not just yourself, but you shamed your family. So how did you manage to draw out the stories from young girls, and what were they willing to do to right the wrong that was done to them?
So reporting wise, they would report to me. But because under RA 9262, I'm sorry for getting technical here, but you can file a TOR for the person if they do not want to do it. That's part of the law. So I told them I know some lawyers because some of the people who taught VAWC as a module were also from my city. So I was like, I can talk to them for you. Reporting wise, nothing happened because again, shame. You're right. They didn't want their families to be put on the spotlight because imagine the type, even for older women, imagine the type of public shaming, the type of stigma that you would be facing because supposedly for women we are taught and we are pressured to hold our families together. So there was a lot of pressure to not come out with it. But what we were happy about is that they were actually able to talk about it with their parents. And their parents were the ones who corrected the situation. Had to push the uncle outside, for example, so that they wouldn't live with them. And I think that's I take that as a victory because if it wasn't for the strong support that the community had, like the community of girls had in my high school. I don't think that they would be able to feel brave enough to tell their parents about it. And also, if it's also that the parents were very much willing to do that, which was also a strength on their part. But other than that, no, nothing in the police. And maybe that's a model of anti-carceral type of resolution. But that was how it was handled during that time.
Are you pursuing these programs on violence against women, educating women, especially young women and girls, about what their rights are? Is that what UN Women's doing in your group?
So thank you for asking that. So with UN Women, my work with UN Women is mainly on coordinating a global civil society movement on ending violence against women and girls. So it's not just in schools, but it's on responses, it's on prevention, and education is part of prevention. So SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, CSE, which is comprehensive sexuality education, is part of prevention, along with certain like points of policies. Like for example, light bulbs, which is like a very simple policy, but it's not direct, but it's a very indirect way of protecting women. There's also transportation systems and changing transportation systems to prevent violence against women and girls, which I've experienced myself in the MRT, being groped by men who are on the train, and just a lot of that, and in at the global scale. On the ground here in my city, because I moved to Visayas and now I'm in Dumaguete. Actually, for this month, we're conducting. We're also with Dr. Jen Elmaco. We implemented Girls Congress. And with Girls Congress, we have alumni, and the alumni and I are planning a research on school-related gender-based violence in 3 high schools in my city right now. It's gonna be. I'm just helping them. It's more their idea than my idea. They just wanted to do it because we've talked heavily about it. I think all women have issues and have had stories of sexual related gender-based violence. And these girls want to do something about it, but they want to establish a baseline of how bad is it? What are the existing mechanisms to help solve it? And how can we promote these mechanisms so that more girls are able to report around school?
Shama mentioned earlier about lights, in public places like waiting sheds. I think I wanted also to bring it up because, as Shama said, simple things like having well lighted waiting sheds and public spaces can actually help increase the security, especially for girls and women. I was involved one time in a study on public transportation system, just like Shama mentioned. In the public transportation system, part of that is to have all these waiting sheds that are secure, and well lighted. So these simple things actually helps in increasing security. But Shama, I also read that you are part of this girls education program with UN, and that you are co-chair of this transformation education. What is this all about? Is this related also with sexual and gender-based violence, or it's another initiative?
So it's definitely related. Transform Education is a group of young feminists working on education to transform education in and through gender equality. So gender equality within classrooms, but also using education as a way to transform the way that society looks at gender equality. That's kind of the goal of the network itself. Within the network, we have different thematic groups. One of it is SRGBV, which is school-related gender-based violence. One of it is gender equal climate education. One of it is SRHR, which is comprehensive sexuality education and sexual rights and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And then one of it is girls education in crisis areas. So we did like a study with the girls education in crisis areas in conflict settings with the higher education institution, and where we talked to girls from conflict settings in Africa and in the Middle East as well. And we've published a whole uh, one pager advocacy paper around it, where we've talked about how there is a need to focus on girls' education even in conflict settings, because for the most part in conflict settings, a lot of the responses are very gender blind, not looking at women, not looking at young girls at all, immediately just like, let's just cram everyone in because it's emergency, like everybody's just trying to respond to what is happening on the ground. But what we're saying is that, look, if you're being gender blind, then you're definitely forgetting one part of the equation, which is women and girls.
Shama, are these studies available online? I mean,
Yes.
it will be interesting if there are components of these studies on social media, for example, because young people today, like even in my class, they really hold on to information from social media instead of going through the journal articles and the books.
We published some things on our Instagram, because we're just mostly on Instagram, and on our Twitter as well. But the paper itself is also a toolkit for social media. So we've put there social media cards that you can use, and you can post on your IG as well.
Great. Yeah.
Because that's how we've been doing things. Like, we don't just publish research papers. It's a lot of graphics, because not everybody will read the words. Maybe I will read the words because I'm a nerd, but not everybody will read all of the words that you publish. So it's a lot of social media cards that you can use as well and post.
By the way, Shama, you're co-founder of the Visayas LBTQ network, and I was asking Ayesah, what happened to the G? What happened to the G? Why is there no G?
Yeah, so the LBTQ network actually started. It's a side thing that I also do, mainly from the VAW space, because if there's one thing that I've learned from engaging within the VAW space, is that you can't just focus on one thing. If you want to solve peace, for example, you also have to think about climate change. You also have to think about LGBTQ plus rights, etc. So you have to be intersectional about the way that you do things. The reason why we formed the Visayas LGBTQ network is that we understand that we have to fight misogyny and the patriarchy, but that this also exists even within the LGBTQ plus community. And cis men within the community still benefit from the patriarchy and misogyny itself. So we want to be able to kind of band together as women and think of what are the ways that we can continue the conversations around misogyny even within the community, and be that voice for our gay friends and for our gay allies, saying, hey, this doesn't work anymore. Like, when gays say things about women, you're benefiting from a structure that puts you on a pedestal and puts us a little bit less because we're both women and gay.
When my kids start talking about gender identities, gender roles, I must admit I am most of the time lost. So can you tell me, Shama, why is this something so important for young people?
There's a joke on TikTok actually where it's like, why are there not a lot of young people getting married, or why aren't there a lot of people like trying to have kids? And it's like, because we're all gay. Generalization aside, I think that just for us, the freedom of being able to express yourself and to be able to explore your identity is something that's very cool. It's it's something that really kind of reaches into our the back of our brains and tries to like control, not control, but like it's really something that we've been racking our brains about, because in a world where you're very connected and almost everyone's identities are similar to each other, like you can see people like describing you, who are you amidst all of that, like who is Shama, who is Amina, who is Ayesah, out of all of the things that are already out there, what makes you unique? So the freedom and the want for expressing ourselves and finding ourselves out, I think that's something that racks our brain all the time. Secondly, I think that just the LGBTQ plus movement has been very successful. Has been, I think, one of the more successful movements to be able to push our agenda forward, the gay agenda forward. We've been looking at lenses through queers. We've been looking through everything with queer lenses. We're, I mean, in my city, we're even doing like queer theology, where we look at the Bible, when we're reading the Bible and we're reading it from a feminist and queer lens, about how Jonathan and David, for example, may be more than just friends, and that's fine.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
And then trying to see like a lot of things from a lens where it's not just what is given to us, but maybe there's something more there that people don't want us to see, and that we just want to explore for ourselves. And I think that's something that the queer movement has really turned on its face as well, being able to push people to see, hey, sex is not just about the biological thing, it's also something that is gendered, that is social, because the moment that you come out and you have a penis, for example, you're immediately assigned the roles of a man, you're immediately assigned the gender of a man, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily born a man, and that you're able to still explore your identity with or without your genitals.
Ayesah and I, we come from the Muslim community, and the Muslim community even more than the Christian or Catholic communities and other uh, faith communities are very strict about the roles that men and women play. And I keep thinking that when you're looking at human security, I guess we really have to maybe expand, right, our definitions. And because you and I, we work on human rights, and when you're talking about human rights, it's not just rights of girls and boys, men and women. It's everybody's right. So Shama, going back to transforming education. So you have this project. This is a UN project, right? Transforming education in crisis beyond the barriers. Uh, can you tell us a little bit more about this, and what does it do for young people, especially girls?
So the work on transform education is actually a broad like a broad umbrella against other things that we're doing. So it's an umbrella for gender equal climate education. It's also an umbrella against SRGBV, so school related gender based violence. It's an umbrella on girls' education in conflict settings, SRHR and CSE. So what we do is, for all over the world, we have a very strong Africa group, actually, because we're trying to strengthen our Southeast Asia and Asia group. But for Africa, for example, we gather individuals and organizations who are working on education at the connections between education and gender equality. So not a lot of people would do that, but there's a lot of young people who are working on gender equality but not on education. And then there are some that are working on education but not on gender equality, and we want to try to bring them together into these spaces. So we're really trying to bring people together through the network. The network is hosted within the UN Girls Education Initiative. So what they do is they're basically our titas, our moms, where they like give us the mentorship that we need. They give us the support that we need. And actually right now there's Education Cannot Wait. It's a high level forum right now that's happening in Geneva, and some of our members are there to talk about our work on girls education in conflict settings. And this is an advocacy tool. Like, as I said, the research that we did, we had like a lot of solidarity circles with girls from with 90 girls from like 4 different countries. And we've published this as an advocacy tool that all organizations within Transform Education can use, but also at the same time as our tool to talk to higher ups. So, for example, we've talked to ECW, which is Education Cannot Wait. It's a huge organization on education and in conflict settings. And we've talked. They would very much say that, and I think I definitely agree with this. The only way to also to make sure that girls' education is also achieved is also to end armed conflict everywhere. Very much agree with that, and that's also one of the things that we support, but we don't really fully work on because you can only work on so much at this point. And then there's also the conversations around SRHR and CSE, where it's just support for organizations on the ground, like Feminine, for example, in the Caribbean provides free pads and tampons for girls in high schools and talks to them about their menstruation, which is something that we support. And then we amplify their work and connect them to different organizations all over the world, that high level organizations that they can talk to and that they can provide insights from the work that they're doing on the ground. So it's really just a matter of bringing a lot of young people together who are already doing the work. We don't have to train them on anything, but if they do need some capacity building, we try to provide it. But we know that they're already doing the work, they're encouraging themselves, they're enriching themselves. We just want to be able to use that and have them teach other young people as well. So it's a cross-pollination type of network.
Back to the conflict affected areas in Mindanao, Shamah and Amina. At one time, while I was doing my PhD research in Liguasan Marsh, and this was way back in 2007, 2008. So that was still the height of armed confrontations between the government forces and the MILF. And then I've talked to some of the families there, and I lived actually in a couple of weeks in some of these areas. And yeah, it's really a usual situation where some of the girls, will never be able to go to school, because school would mean that they would have to travel 2-3 hours by foot or by small boat. And most often, it's not because the parents do not want their children to be educated, but there is a real and present danger for them to be traveling out of their villages and to go to school and for them to be coming home. So that's really, a key issue when you talk about girls' education in conflict-affected communities. So I wonder if, UNICEF and UN Women in Philippines, also take note of that kind of reality with girls' education, because it's not. Yeah, nobody's really contesting that, we want to educate children, but the reality is that you have very high risk areas in the Philippines that, sending for parents to send out their children, whether they are boys or girls, they are really putting their children at harm's way. So, what do you think about that, Shama?
We've definitely talked about that. But also, Dr. Ayesah, there is a contestation about girls' education. In the Philippines, maybe not. Like maybe we are very much more driving our kids to school, but in other parts of other parts of the world, they are heavily blocking girls from going to school. Amina has talked about Afghanistan, for example. They've blocked girls from entering university just recently. I think December 2022. They've also blocked they've blocked women from other types of professions as well. So there's this ongoing anti-women sentiment from other parts of the world, which we're still definitely pushing back on. In terms of girls setting, like girls' experiences in conflict settings, and I think also young women's experiences in conflict settings, completely agree with that. The way from school to work and the way from home to school or the way from home to work, that is something that's also another barrier of the violence that you experience on the way is also another barrier. So it's not just being able to get there, it's also, okay, even if it is super near, will you be experiencing violence on the way there? And that's very much something that you will experience if you're in a conflict setting. when girls go from their home to their school, for example, we all know that one of the tools of war is kidnapping girls. We all know that one of the tools of war is rape against young women. And this is something that people are very much scared of, which is why ECW would say, in order to get more young girls and women to school, we need to have an end to armed conflict, which is something that is very difficult to end. But also, it's something that maybe there are certain, like, levels of secret schools that we can work into, or the practice of girls educating other
So, Sham,
girls.
What came to mind immediately, the Australian model from decades ago, generations ago, because the population was so widely scattered, it didn't make sense to put up schools everywhere. So they would have schools on air
Mm.
via radio, and you work with what you have. And I keep wondering why that's not being used as much. Before we go, I wanted to read to you part of the Chiquitita song, because I think this is the first time, Ayesah and Shama, that I've really thought about the content of the song. It was just a popular song before to me. And listen to this. It says, Chiquitita, you and I know how the heartaches come and they go, and the scars they're leaving. You'll be dancing once again, and the pain will end. You will have no time for grieving. Chiquitita, you and I cry, but the sun is still in the sky and shining above you. Let me hear you sing once more, like you did before. Sing a new song, Chiquitita. See that? Now I understand the meaning of the song, Ayesah and Shama. And I think
that's very
we're learning to sing that
nice.
song more. Then as we end on that beautiful note, Shama, perhaps you would want to give a message to our listeners, especially the young people who are listening to us, about what they can do to right some wrongs and to speak up for themselves and be counted. Over to you, Shama.
It's actually very difficult, but I'll try. Um, I think for the young people who are listening to this podcast right now, I know that a lot of us want to change the world. That's kind of like what we're looking at right now, and whether or not that's through social media or whether or not that's through our communities. Um, just remember that their individual actions matter, but having it done with communities is much better. The more people that join the work on ending violence against women and girls, the more people that join on the work on ending armed conflict, the more people that join the work on building peace, the more that we can actually make it a better, the more that we can actually make the work actually work. So if you're interested in doing that, there are organizations that you can join, or you can start an organization on your own. But I'm pretty sure that everything is online and you can look it up. And I don't know if you can reach the Amina and Dr. Ayesah to join Women Peace Builders organizations, but I think that's a suggestion that I would do. Start with joining an organization and being enriched in that organization.
Thank you so much, Shama, for your message and your invitation to young people and those who are like me, I hope, young at heart, and yes, who's somewhere in the middle. So, so thanks so much, Shama, for joining us, and to our listeners from all over the world. Thank you so much for staying with us and eavesdropping in our conversation with Shama. This is Amina Rasul from the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy saying bye for now, and join us again next week. Ayesah?
Okay, and this is Ayesah. We're here in Kota Kinabalu. Thank you again, Shama. I'm sure all our listeners enjoyed our conversation. So until next time, we will see you again in She Talks Peace. Bye, everybody.
Bye!
She Talks Peace is brought to you in partnership with Podcast Network Asia and Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. For more information, check out their website at podcastnetwork.asia and podmetrics.co.
The views and opinions expressed by the podcast creators, hosts, and guests do not necessarily reflect the official policy and position of Podcast Network Asia, the hosts of the program, or other programs of the network. Any content provided by the people on the podcast are of their own opinion and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything.